In this lesson, we'll be learning about the 6 kingdoms of life, and this is going to be a quick general survey of these kingdoms. We're not going to into a lot of detail, and there is a lot of detail in this slide presentation, so I've included the link after this video so you can go back and look at this information if you have any questions or want to learn any more. As we go through the lesson today, we're going to be trying to answer several things about each of the kingdoms. We're going to want to answer what type of cell. That means prokaryotic or eukaryotic. Prokaryotes do not have a nucleus or other cell organelles. The nucleus in eukaryotes is what contains the DNA, and they have other cell organelles like endoplasmic reticulum and Golgi apparatus and chloroplasts, but prokaryotes don't. Their DNA just floats around in the middle of their cell, and they only have ribosomes, maybe a couple other cell organelles, and their cell membrane and cell wall if they have one. We're also going to answer if organisms are unicellular or multicellular. That means, are they made up of one cell or are they made up of many cells? We're going to be answering the question, what type of organism are they? Producers, consumers, or decomposers? Producers make their own food using energy from light or from chemicals. Consumers have to eat to get energy, to get food. And then decomposers get their energy through breaking down dead things. You also need to answer the question, what type of reproduction do they have? Do they reproduce asexually, meaning they reproduce just by themselves? That's usually a type of fission, and we'll talk about that with bacteria. Or do they reproduce sexually, meaning there's 2 organisms involved that contribute to an offspring? You also need to answer general characteristics within each kingdom and also give some examples of what is in each of the kingdoms. So now we're going to move on to the 6 kingdoms, and remember, you have to answer those questions for each kingdom, and you can look on the right hand side now to get a general feel for what kind of information you need to fill out. So first we're going to talk about the bacteria kingdoms, Eubacteria and Archaebacteria. Bacteria used to be in one kingdom, but as scientists have learned more, they've split them into 2. This information is true for both of the bacteria kingdoms. So you can put this information for both Archaebacteria and Eubacteria. Bacteria are unicellular, meaning they're only made of one cell, and they're prokaryotic, meaning they do not have a nucleus and other organelles. Some of the bacteria have a cell wall. Bacteria are decomposers or producers. They get their energy from living things, and they make their own food from their surroundings. So that's the type of organism the bacteria are. They're either decomposers or producers. I would also list consumers on there. Not all bacteria break down dead things. Now this is a characteristic you can put that's true for both Archaebacteria and Eubacteria. Some bacteria are helpful and some are harmful. You have thousands, millions of bacteria that live on your skin, inside your gut, that help you digest food and help you in a myriad of other ways. But some bacteria do cause infections in other organisms. Now this is true for Archaebacteria and Eubacteria. These kingdoms reproduce asexually. They split themselves in half in a process called binary fission. So one cell splits into 2, that new resulting cell is usually called a clone because it's genetically identical. So that's the type of reproduction they have. Now let's focus on Archaebacteria and some of its characteristics. Probably the main characteristic of Archaebacteria is that they live in extreme environments. And that's one you need to put down in your notes. These are very ancient bacteria. They've been around for 3.5 billion years. The Earth has been around for 4 billion years. So there are some of these Archaebacteria that are methanogens. They create methane. They live in sewage treatment plants, digestive tracts of ruminants, those are like cows, and bogs. So in kind of really stinky places is where these bacteria live. Halophiles mean they love salt. There are halophile bacteria that live in the Great Salt Lake. They can endure the extreme salt conditions and where other bacteria would not be able to. And some archaebacteria are thermophiles, meaning they love the heat, and they're found in very hot areas that would otherwise exclude bacteria, like in hot springs. So just to review, in case you missed it, what type of cell are archaebacteria? They're prokaryotic and they're unicellular. What type of organism? They're producers and decomposers. And what type of reproduction? They are asexual and binary fission. And characteristics I would put on archaebacteria are they live in extreme environments. And some examples of archaebacteria are thermophiles, halophiles, and methanogens that make the methane. Now let's move on to eubacteria, the other bacteria kingdom. For a characteristic, you can put they live everywhere. They live in air, the water, the soil. They live on your skin. Some bacteria are photosynthetic, meaning they make their own food using sunlight, or other bacteria absorb food from the material they live in. And we're not going to worry about this page, but you can go and look at it if you want to later. So just in review, they are prokaryotic unicellular organisms. They are producers and decomposers, and they have asexual reproduction. Characteristics, they live everywhere. Some are photosynthetic, and some examples we should put down. There are sphere-shaped, rod-shaped, or spiral-shaped bacteria. Strep throat, streptococcus is a good example. E. coli is an example. Syphilis and Lyme disease are another example. Okay, now we're going to move on to the Protist kingdom. In the Protist kingdom, most are unicellular, but some are multicellular. So both in this case. And all protists are eukaryotic, meaning they have a nucleus. The type of organisms, there's decomposers, producers, and consumers in the Protist kingdom. The Protist kingdom is kind of an interesting kingdom. It's a kingdom, it's kind of like the junk drawer kingdom, where if scientists don't really know where to put it, they kind of throw it in the Protist kingdom. It's a grouping of a bunch of really unique and different organisms. So there are fungus-like protists, plant-like protists, and animal-like protists. Some examples of protists are water molds, downy mildews, and slime molds. There are also euglenoids, dinoflagellates, diatoms, and algae. So even seaweed is an example of a protist. Seaweed's not a plant, it's a protist. And then animal-like protists are amoebas, cilia, giardia, the protist that causes giardia. It's a protist. So what type of cell? They're eukaryotic. They can be unicellular, multicellular, or live in colonies. What type of organism are protists? They're producers, consumers, and decomposers. And what type of reproduction? They have asexual or sexual. Characteristics of protists, it's kind of a varied kingdom. It contains a lot of organisms that may be fungi-like, plant-like, or animal-like. And then examples I gave a bunch up above: giardia, seaweed, algae. Now on to the fungus kingdom. In the fungus kingdom, the type of cells, they're unicellular or multicellular. Fungus is eukaryotic, and fungi have cell walls. Now this is important of fungi and pretty characteristic, a big characteristic you need to put down. They are decomposers. They get energy by feeding on dead or decaying tissue. All fungi are decomposers. And the type of reproduction they have, they reproduce asexually with spores. Characteristics, mushrooms and other fungi grow almost everywhere, depending on the natural material, on every natural material imaginable. Some fungi grow in association with certain trees, others grow on large logs, some grow in the soil, on decomposing leaves. You can find some in your lawn sometimes. Here's some examples of fungi. We have club fungi, sac fungi, lichens, conjugation fungi, and imperfect fungi. Club fungi, these are going to be your mushrooms, your basic mushrooms. So here's some examples. You could just put mushrooms down for your examples. These are interesting sac fungi. Here's the lichens. You'll find lichens on trees a lot of the time or on rocks. This is black bread mold. We have some other fungi. A good example you could put down for fungi is penicillium. That's where we get penicillin, but the penicillium fungi is where we get the antibiotic penicillin. Okay, some characteristics of the fungi. Some are edible. Drugs made from fungi cure diseases. We get a lot of our antibiotics from mushrooms. So in review, fungi are eukaryotic, and some are unicellular and some are multicellular. They are decomposers and they reproduce asexually. Now on to the plant kingdom. Plants are multicellular and they are eukaryotic. They are very complex cells and they have a nucleus and many other organelles. Characteristics, they all have chloroplasts. That's the organelle inside their cells that allows them to complete photosynthesis, to get the energy from the sun to make their own food. All plants are adapted for living on land. All plants are producers, so that's the type of organism they are. They're producers. And in photosynthesis, plants use the energy in sunlight to change water and carbon dioxide into sugar, called glucose, and oxygen. So characteristic is they all perform photosynthesis. For plants in the type of reproduction, most plants reproduce with seeds. Seeds are a form of sexual reproduction, but ferns and mosses reproduce asexually with spores. So there are lots and lots of plants, lots of examples you could give. We're just going to kind of move through some of this. Moss is a plant. Ferns are a plant. Conifers, gymnosperms like pine trees, spruce trees, are plants. Angiosperms, meaning they produce flowers, are plants. So we have lots of examples. Tulips, corn. So plants are eukaryotic, they're multicellular, they're producers, and they reproduce asexually with spores or sexually with seeds. Finally, the animal kingdom. Animals are multicellular and eukaryotic. They have very complex cells that have a nucleus and many other organelles. Animal cells do not have a cell wall. All animals are consumers, meaning they feed on other organisms. So some are carnivores, herbivores, omnivores, or scavengers. So carnivore animals eat meat, herbivores eat plants, omnivores eat both meat and plants, and scavengers eat dead things. Many invertebrate animals are capable of reproducing sexually and asexually, and all vertebrate animals reproduce sexually. So there's both asexual and sexual reproduction in animals. There are two types of animals, so characteristics. We have invertebrates, animals without a backbone, and vertebrates, animals with a backbone. So lots of animal examples. We have sponges, jellyfish, worms, mollusks, insects, and fish, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, birds. So all animals are eukaryotic, they're multicellular, they're consumers, and they have both asexual and sexual reproduction. So that's our general survey of the kingdoms, and hopefully you've been able to fill in your notes and submit those notes, and then you can come back to the slide presentation if you'd like to learn more.